Do you remember in the Harry Potter books how everyone was so scared to even say the name Voldemort? Well, it seems that the Walt Disney Company has created a similar situation in their creative endeavors. No, I'm not talking about the Disney Park sign that described Bob Chapek as a master shipbuilder. I'd imagine Bob Iger doesn't care if people bring Chapek's name up because everyone at Disney seems to agree that Chapek is not on Bob Iger's level. The name that Disney and Pixar employees are scared to say is that of John Lasseter, the now fired creative luminary that was the chief creative officer of the most financially and critically consistent period of the Walt Disney Company. Let's talk about that on That Park Place. I'm Jonas J. Campbell, an investigative reporter for That Park Place. We've been covering film threats coverage by Chris Gore and Alan Ng of The D-Files, The Fall of John Lasseter being part 1, in a series of stories that should be listened to by anyone interested in the history of the Walt Disney Company, and specifically animation. People are no longer encouraged, in fact, they're scared to bring up the name of John Lasseter while at the company, a man who helped shape the identity of almost every film from Tangled all the way to Frozen 2. They've made him into some kind of a boogeyman so that whenever his name is brought up online, people will resist you immediately and say, John Lasseter was a bad man. As ridiculous as that claim would seem to be, since he has a job at Skydance Animation, which includes former Disney talent, there seems to be a persistent rumor that John Lasseter is some kind of man who goes around assaulting people, when the most that people could come up with when asking what he did is that he might have made female employees too uncomfortable by hugging too much, and sometimes he liked to drink. Let's talk about that on That Park Place. The last thing that I want to say is talking about Disney's reaction post-Lasseter. There are two strategies that you can employ when you have a regime change. If you think about the Civil War in the United States, there were two strategies that were put forward. One is you shame everybody who just lost and make it so they will never surrender and so that they hate you forever. Or the other is to go for unification. One of these things will work to create bitterness forever, and one of these things will create a situation in which you one day can have a united country. We're seeing some of the ramifications of some of those decisions today. What I want to bring up here is how Lasseter was treated as a name, as a he who shall not be named at the Walt Disney Company after he left. John Lasseter, the disgraced public figure. So now it appears the pieces were in place with certain executives wanting to oust Lasseter and a growing faction within the rank and file pressing forward with a stack of allegations against him that to this day goes unprosecuted and unproven. With pressure from top and bottom in June 2018, Lasseter announced that he would leave the company at the end of the year. That is a resignation that is almost like a firing. One source told us that during an all-hands meeting, once the announcement was made, a female employee raised her and
Jonas,
and
as
asked,
you say this, I want everybody to pay
let me finish the sentence.
This is big.
Here.
Yes, this is big.
Can we have a woman run this place now? If a man said a similar phrase, it would be very easy to say that this is sexism.
Yeah, I mean I think that's the biggest statement in the entire thing, because when you have that kind of a response with the creative genius of your generation exiting the company, when that is the response, fairly or unfairly,
might suggest a motivation.
It demonstrates that there's a disconnect with the people who work there and reality itself.
And it's in everything they do. It's in this issue of who the contractors were and weren't for RCID. It's in this issue of who gets hired and who doesn't. If it's entirely based not on the service you provide, not on the quality of your work, not on your qualifications, but on these exterior factors of your race or your sex or whatever, aside from the prejudicial nature of it, it's not good business.
Right,
it's
and
just not good business.
Their response when Nelson Peltz said, hey, by the way, I've got a CFO of the Walt Disney Company, a former CFO of the Walt Disney Company that would be a great board member who has more experience in the industry than anyone on your board. What did they say? Oh, well, we have a diverse board right now. Not trying to ignore the fact that the last two people that the Walt Disney Company put up on their board pre-nomination phase, they just added them. They didn't ask the shareholders. Were two white guys. Not that there's anything wrong with either of those people. They're qualified to be on the board. They just also happen to be the wrong color according to Disney's own metrics. And I'll also point out that when they show their board, they have literal check boxes for diversity on the board SEC filings.
This
is an anti-meritocracy standpoint here. I'm not saying diversity is wrong. I'm saying that using diversity to cover up for your own incompetence is wrong.
Well, and this is why they needed to get rid of John Lasseter in the first place, because he would have inhibited this. He would have been the correcting force to challenge this kind of stuff. They had to get rid of him because a statement like that couldn't have existed before.
And by the way, there are quality people who happen to be diverse who are getting screwed by this process too.
Correct.
Because it's not just what your color or sex or orientation are, it's who you like and who you know and who you don't, and it's the DEI version of a casting couch.
Right. So as if this article was just trying to follow our conversation, I think this next part goes well for what we're talking about. This source mentioned that Disney had plenty of qualified women in position of authority, yet it was repugnant how they planned to replace a single man, John Lasseter, who arguably made billions for the company, with someone solely on the qualification that the person was female, rather than find someone, female or male, who had the passion, experience, and talent to take the company where it needed to go creatively. Common sense would tell you that your experience matters more in business than your appearance. Sadly, John Lasseter's firing wasn't exactly a surprise.
You know what's missing from all of this is there's not a story of a reaction, a negative reaction to what the woman said. In the appropriate setting, what should have happened here is that the rest of the audience should have groaned. The rest of the Pixar employees should have groaned, or because there are certain things that are just taboo. You don't do them, right? You don't flip off an old lady. You don't do that. And if you do that, people look at you like you're crazy for doing so. And this is the kind of statement that should have drawn that kind of reaction from the audience around them.
Yeah.
And what it suggests to me is that we have a claim of sexism against John Lasseter. But if this report is true here, and I can't imagine that it's not true because of the source from where it's coming, we definitely know that sexism was at play in Pixar. So
yes,
either one side is wrong, and that's Pixar, or two sides are wrong, that's both Pixar and Lasseter. But one of those is dubious at best.
And the audience didn't dare groan because they're afraid of being likewise kicked out.
Indeed. Right. When someone commits a crime in front of everyone and it's not prosecuted, you know who is in charge. When someone gets up and says something that is clearly sex discrimination in front of HR, I'm going to say HR was probably there for the announcement. If this person did not see some kind of consequence, some kind of HR meeting saying, hey, don't do that, then this shows that there is a certain party or certain sentiment within the company that is allowed to exist and is allowed to flourish. And we've seen, as we've reported on this channel, because of documents that have leaked out of the Walt Disney Company, that they actually encouraged people and based their pay on whether or not they bent the knee to diversity initiatives. So I have no doubt that this is something that maybe even someone clapped.
And it's pervasive in our business culture. If you've seen these recent revelations about IBM telling people their bonus depended on their hiring of people according to diversity quotas.
Yes.
That what's his name? O'Keefe came out with.
Yeah. Now, the thing that I want to get to here is how they turned John Lasseter into a Voldemort in the company. The message was clear. John Lasseter left the Walt Disney Company an utter and total disgrace. Disney legend, forget it. In fact, moves have been made within the halls of Disney to remove his legacy as if he never existed. I often like to bring up this week the Disney 100 special that ABC 2020 put out, which is, of course, owned by Disney. They covered... any other company covering this would, of course, mention John Lasseter. But instead, when they get to the Pixar session, they talk about how Pixar was so much like Disney. And everybody always said that they were like brothers. And this is this great company. And you know who did a great job over at Pixar? Bob Iger, when he bought it from Steve Jobs. Not a single mention of John Lasseter and what he built there.
It's the Stalinist airbrush technique, where people who were suddenly non-persons were removed from photographs.
Right. You did not draw that, Lou. You did not draw that.
This isn't the cigarette sitting in Walt's hand that we remove, and it doesn't remove an aspect of his character. This is a man who made your company better, and again, made you billions of dollars. And it sounds like he didn't really do anything here that couldn't be described, that he couldn't have been put on probation and then brought back.
It's a man who you could arguably say, if he hadn't been there before you bought the company, you wouldn't have bought the company because it wouldn't have been something worth buying.
To tell you the swing of just how just rapidly this is all changed. At the previous D23 Expo before John Lasseter is let go, his Hawaiian shirt collection is on display as a feature of that expo. And now we're hearing quotes of, are Hawaiian shirts even allowed to be worn on campus anymore?
Right.
I mean, that is a huge chasm right there that we've crossed in a very short period of time.
To get back into what they're saying here, yes, anything that reminded the rank and file of Lasseter was removed from plain sight. Are Hawaiian shirts even allowed to be worn on campus anymore? Or heaven forbid, you should utter the phrase, when John was here. Publicly, not much better. I recently mentioned John's name to a Disney fanatic friend, and their instant retort was, he's a bad man. I got to say, whenever we talk about John Lasseter publicly, people come out of the woodwork and act like he was like some crazed beast going after women.
Well, unless they're Apple or Netflix, and then they're happy to have him.
Right.
Yeah.
And finally here, arguably Lasseter's departure has also marked the start of a steady creative decline of the Walt Disney Company. The last film he directly influenced was Pixar's Coco in 2017. Many of us fans believe that Coco is Pixar's crowning achievement in its prolific catalog. By the company's own admission, the creative cracks started to appear at its next feature, Cars 3, as they began applying gender-based statistical analysis to story development, for example, counting lines of dialogue. More on this to come. Though he was never officially charged with formal harassment claims or indictment, and we have very little evidence one way or another, our sources point to the talent who eventually defected from Disney and followed Lasseter to Skydance Animation as an indicator of the veracity of the allegations laid against him. That would be Brad Bird. It would be Alan Menken, one of the people responsible for the Disney Renaissance of the 1990s. Who else? Rich Moore, who directed Wreck-It Ralph and Zootopia, and also fixed Ralph Breaks the Internet in many ways. He's over there now.
And it wasn't just people leaving Disney or Pixar to join John Lasseter, but also you had people coming out of schools, animation schools and academies and so forth, who were opting to join John Lasseter in his new venture over Disney. So it was this gravitational pull that pulled from all levels of the industry, but most especially Disney.
Yep. This to me, first of all, I want to make sure that everybody knows Film Threat will be covering this more. I recommend going and reading the article itself. And also, of course, Film Threat has a channel where they go over this stuff, and you can ask questions directly. MyPal Al on Twitter, and at, I think, the real Chris Gore on Twitter. I'm sure they're happy to answer any questions that they can. The thing that bothers me the most about this situation is it's an indication to me that maybe the Walt Disney Company has given up on the idea of actually having creative people, brilliant people in their company making great things. And instead, they're going towards this idea of they need to refresh their IP. We know from documents from the investor meetings that the analysis from Needham said that Bob Iger knows that Pixar is in trouble and doesn't have any great talent. And so they're going to be giving them IPs that everyone already knows so that they have the best chance to succeed.
Yep.
And that's an indication to me, one, that's an insult to the people that are coming up. And two, that is an indication that they personally don't have any faith in these people as directors within the company.
Oh, that was the initial reaction I had when they announced Frozen 3 and Zootopia 2 and all this kind of stuff.
And Frozen 4. Don't forget about Frozen 4.
And yeah. Frozen 4. Oh, God. It's a recognition that they simply don't have the creative talent to create anything original. And so, yes, best chance is to get them an IP, which, by the way, could seriously, I mean, if you don't get the right creatives in there to shepherd those films, well, we've seen franchises under Disney's thumb fall victim to bad creatives and bad creative decisions there. So you could end up ruining those franchises.
Vash, are you suggesting there could be anxiety over Inside Out 2?
Oh my!
There could be a little.
If you don't get that out there, you should.
Who doesn't? Who doesn't want to cuddle up with Anxiety, the new character in Inside Out 2?
Well, I would just refer people to go check out the Pareto principle. It is the idea that the very few at the very top produce the vast majority of successes. Is it fair? No, but it functions all the way up through various different classes of biology, economic, or the economy, and creativity. And it is what it is. There are people who are resoundingly, amazingly creative and successful. And when you divorce yourself from those people, you do so at your own peril, especially if you've enjoyed the good graces of what they have given you. So John Lasseter exiting, absolutely, the idea that he's replaceable, clearly not, at least not for many years or perhaps even decades. So when you grab hold of those people who can do amazing things, you better keep hold of them as long as you can.
Thank you so much for watching to the end of the video. Let us know your thoughts in the comment section down below. Is the company just trying to move on from an awkward situation? Or is there a mouse-eared Gestapo trying to change company history until we forget who really saved the company from 2007 to 2018? You tell us, because we would love to know. This clip was part of our now regular Thursday live stream, which starts at noon Eastern Time. Of course, if you're not in that time zone, just hit the notification bell if you want YouTube to tell you when that is. Like this video if you like this video. If you know somebody who is as interested as we are in this kind of thing, then maybe you should share the link with them. And of course, please consider subscribing to That Park Place for all the news that should be fun.
Thanks for watching That Park Place News. For more information, consider checking out www.thatparkplace.com. And don't forget to subscribe, share, like, and send this out on your favorite social media accounts.